My wife humiliated me in front of everyone and called me this family's biggest mistake. She pointed straight at me and said we use protection 99% of the time, and I was the 1% that slipped through. I walked out that night with $40 and a backpack, and 6 years later, she was the one kneeling and crying. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. And before you decide what kind of man you think I am, let me tell you something. I didn't plan to survive this. I just refused to die quietly. This isn't a revenge fantasy. This is what actually happened when pride, cruelty, and time collided. Before I get into this, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if stories like mine hit you where it hurts, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Helps Uncle Mickle keep bringing you the truth nobody else wants to talk about. All right, let me take you back to the moment my life split clean in two. It was a Saturday evening in early fall, the kind where the air smells like grilled meat and dry leaves. We were at her parents' house, big backyard, folding chairs lined up, kids running wild, music playing too loud from a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out. Family reunion energy, smiles glued on faces, beer bottles sweating in hands. I remember standing there with a paper plate bending under the weight of food, thinking how normal it all felt. Too normal, maybe. I didn't know it then, but that was the last calm breath I'd take for years. My wife, Jennifer, was already drinking. She always drank more around her family, said it helped her tolerate them. That should have told me something, but love makes you generous with excuses. She was loud, animated, holding court like she always did. People listened when she talked. She liked that. At some point, someone made a joke. I don't even remember what it was. Something about kids. Something harmless. Jennifer laughed. Then she didn't stop. She turned, locked eyes with me, and that smile twisted into something sharp. And then she said it. Honestly, she said, loud enough for the whole yard. He's this family's biggest mistake. The music felt like it dropped out of the air. Conversations thinned. A few nervous laughs fluttered and died. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I stayed still. I thought maybe she was joking. Maybe this was her version of teasing. Married couples roast each other, right? Then she raised her hand and pointed at me. We use protection 99% of the time, she said, smirking. He's the remaining 1%. There it was. Not a joke. Not a slip. A public execution. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed too hard. Her mother looked away. Her father stared at the ground like it might open and swallow him whole. I stood there with a plastic fork in my hand and realized something important. Nobody was going to stop her. Jennifer kept going, riding the silence like a wave. She talked about wasted years, about settling, about how her life would have been different if she'd made better choices. Each word landed slow and heavy, and I didn't say a thing. Not because I didn't have words, but because in that moment, something inside me went completely quiet. I remember setting the plate down. I remember feeling lighter without it, like I was shedding weight I'd been carrying too long. I remember walking to the car while voices buzzed behind me, none of them calling my name. I drove home alone, packed a backpack, counted the cash in my wallet, $40 and some change. Left my keys on the counter. That night, I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I wasn't staying. And as I pulled away, I had no idea that 6 years later, the woman who broke me in front of everyone would be on her knees in front of me, begging. But that part came much later. Before all of that, before the words that cut me loose from my own life, things looked steady. Not perfect, just solid enough that you stopped checking the foundation. Jennifer and I had been married 11 years by then, met in our late 20s, both of us already a little tired of dating games and empty promises. She was sharp, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room like she owned the floor beneath her feet. I was quieter, worked with my hands, kept my head down, believed consistency counted for something. We fit, at least on paper. We bought a modest house in a decent neighborhood, white siding, creaky porch steps, a maple tree out front that dumped leaves like it had a personal grudge every October. I fixed what broke. She handled the finances. That was our unspoken arrangement. She liked control. I liked peace. Mornings were routine. Coffee brewed too strong. News murmuring in the background. Jennifer rushing, always running 5 minutes late. Heels clicking across the floor while I handed her travel mugs and reminders she didn't ask for. Evenings were quieter. Dinner at the table most nights. Sometimes the TV. Sometimes just silence that didn't feel awkward yet. From the outside, we were normal. Stable. The kind of couple neighbors nodded at approvingly. Inside, I told myself the distance was just adulthood. That the spark fading was natural. That Jennifer's impatience wasn't contempt, just stress. She had a way of talking that cut sharp when she was tired. Little jabs disguised as jokes. I absorbed them. Told myself I was being too sensitive. I believed marriage meant endurance. You don't flinch every time it gets uncomfortable. You hold the line. Family gatherings were always her stage. Jennifer changed when we were around her parents and siblings. Louder, bolder, more performative. She liked being admired. I stood back, let her shine. That was my role. Support beam, not spotlight. Her parents were cordial with me. Never warm, never cruel. Polite enough to keep things smooth. Her mother treated me like a temporary fixture. Her father respected work ethic, so at least I had that. I didn't notice when respect turned into invisibility. Looking back, the signs were there, thin as hairline cracks. Jennifer stopped asking my opinion on things that affected both of us. Big purchases appeared without conversation. Decisions made, then announced. If I questioned them, she'd sigh like I was slowing her down. There was a look she started giving me too. Hard to explain. Like impatience mixed with disappointment. Like she was measuring me against something I couldn't see. Still, there were good days. Laughing over burned dinners. Road trips with bad music and worse directions. Nights where she fell asleep with her head on my chest, breath slow and even. And I'd think, this is enough. This is real. I clung to those moments. We all do. Work was steady, not glamorous. I took pride in reliability. I showed up. I fixed problems. I believed that mattered at home too. That being dependable was a form of love. Jennifer didn't see it that way. She talked more about what she'd missed out on. About people from her past doing better, living bigger lives. Promotions, vacations, social media highlight reels. I listened, offered reassurance she brushed aside. "You're too comfortable," she said once, not angry, just factual. I laughed it off. Didn't ask what that meant. That's the thing about comfort. You don't realize it's complacency until the ground shifts. The night of the reunion, when I stood there with that paper plate and thought everything was normal, I wasn't lying to myself. I truly believed we were just another couple navigating time. I didn't know Jennifer had already rewritten the story in her head. I didn't know I'd been demoted from partner to problem. And I definitely didn't know that the woman standing beside me, smiling for the family photo earlier that afternoon, had already decided I was expendable. The warning was there. I just didn't recognize it yet. The days after that reunion didn't explode right away. They sagged. Jennifer acted like nothing had happened. No apology. No acknowledgement. She moved through the house with the same clipped efficiency, talking about groceries, schedules, bills. Like she hadn't stripped me bare in front of her entire bloodline. That unsettled me more than if she'd screamed again. I waited for a quiet moment. Picked my timing carefully. Like you'd do when you sense thin ice under your feet. One evening after dinner, dishes still in the sink, TV off, the house calm. "About the other night," I said, keeping my voice even. She didn't look up from her phone. "What about it?" I swallowed. "You embarrassed me." That finally got her attention. She looked at me like I'd said something mildly inconvenient. "You're being dramatic," she said. Everyone knew I was joking. I nodded, though my chest tightened. Jokes leave room to laugh. What she'd done left silence. I let it go. Or at least, I told myself I did. But something shifted after that. A low hum of awareness started running under everything. I noticed details I'd ignored before. Jennifer taking calls in the garage. Stepping outside to text. Angling her phone away when I walked by. When I asked who it was, she answered too quickly. Work. Jennifer hated taking work home. She started staying out later. Said she was networking, meeting people who could open doors. I wanted to be supportive. Told myself ambition wasn't betrayal. But the smell of unfamiliar cologne once, not hers, not mine, clung to her jacket. She brushed it off as someone hugging her at a bar. I didn't argue. I logged it away. Sleep became lighter. I'd wake to the glow of her phone at 2 in the morning, her thumb moving fast, face carefully blank. When I rolled over, she'd lock the screen and turn away. "You okay?" I asked once. "Go back to sleep," she said. "You're imagining things." That word stuck with me. Imagining. Like my instincts were childish. I started replaying moments from the past year. The way she'd corrected me in public. How often she sighed when I spoke. How she referred to her plans, her future. A man knows when he's slowly being erased. Still, I didn't confront her again. Not yet. I needed something solid. Proof. Or at least clarity. I wasn't going to blow up my life on a feeling. Then came the money. I balanced the checkbook one Saturday morning. A habit I kept even after handing financial control over to her. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize. Small at first. Then bigger. Hotel charges. Restaurants I'd never heard of. When I asked, she barely looked at the statements. "Client dinners," she said. "You wouldn't understand how this works." That stung more than I expected. Like I was being disqualified from my own marriage. I told myself to breathe. To stay rational. People under stress act strange. That didn't automatically mean betrayal. But every time I tried to relax, that backyard moment replayed in my head. Her finger pointed at me. Her voice confident. Cruel. Comfortable. You don't humiliate someone like that unless you've already decided they don't matter. One night, I came home early. No warning. The house was empty. But her laptop sat open on the kitchen table. That never happened. Jennifer guarded her devices like state secrets. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, telling myself not to snoop. That crossing that line would change things forever. I closed the laptop. Then I reopened it. I didn't look far. I didn't need to. A calendar entry stared back at me, bold and unapologetic. A name I didn't recognize. Repeating appointments. Hotels listed like offices. My hands shook, but my mind went strangely clear. I closed the laptop again, just as I heard her car pull into the driveway. I sat at the table, staring at my hands, realizing something important. Whatever was coming next, I was already late to the truth. I didn't confront her that night. I wish I could say it was strategy, but truth is, I needed time to steady myself. Once you speak a truth like that out loud, there's no putting it back. Jennifer walked in, keys clattering, voice light. She talked about traffic, about a headache, about needing a drink. I listened, nodded, played my part. Inside, something was unraveling thread by thread. Over the next week, I paid attention like I never had before. Not in a jealous way. In a quiet, almost clinical way. I stopped asking questions and started observing answers. Her stories didn't line up. Times shifted. Names changed. One night, she said she was meeting a client named David. 2 days later, the same dinner became a group thing. When I asked which hotel the conference was at, she hesitated just long enough for the lie to form. That pause told me more than words ever could. I waited until she fell asleep one night. Her phone was face down on the nightstand, buzzing softly with incoming notifications she pretended not to hear. I stared at it longer than I want to admit. My heart thudded, so loud I was sure it would wake her. I picked it up. The passcode was our anniversary. That detail broke something in me. Messages. Long ones. Familiar ones. A man named Mark. Not poetic. Not dramatic. Practical. Intimate. Plans, complaints, jokes about me. About my routines. About how predictable I was. There it was. Not just infidelity, replacement. Photos followed. Hotel rooms. Reflections in mirrors. Her smile looked different in those pictures. Freer. Like she'd taken off a mask I didn't know she wore. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Lay down beside her. Stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I took off work. Sat in my truck in a grocery store parking lot for 3 hours. Doing nothing but breathing and replaying. Every insult. Every dismissal. Every moment I'd swallowed my pride to keep peace. I wasn't just betrayed. I'd been rewritten as the villain to justify it. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. A week later, I followed her. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. Watched her walk into a hotel downtown, like she belonged there. Confident, unashamed. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I sat in my truck and felt something cold settle in my chest. That night, when she came home, I asked her directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. She sighed, rubbed her temples, and said, "I didn't want it to come out like this." That sentence told me everything. Not remorse, not guilt, just inconvenience. She talked for a long time. About feeling trapped. About needing more. About how we'd grown apart. She framed it like a mutual failure. Like I'd missed a meeting where this decision was made. I asked her how long. "Does it matter?" she said. Yes, it mattered. It mattered because every extra day was another lie I'd lived inside. I slept on the couch after that. Packed some clothes. Told her I needed space. She didn't stop me. Didn't ask where I was going. Just nodded like a manager approving a resignation. The final blow didn't come in private, though. It came in public. The way she liked things. That family reunion wasn't a drunken accident. It was a declaration. She wanted witnesses. She wanted to rewrite the narrative while I stood there silent. When I finally understood that, the humiliation burned hotter than anger. By the time I walked out that night with $40 and a backpack, the marriage had already been over for months. I was just the last one to know. I slept in my truck that first night. Cold. Awake. Staring at the dark. And for the first time in my adult life, I realized something terrifying. I had lost my home, my marriage, and my identity, all at once. Pain makes noise at first. Loud, chaotic, demanding attention. Then, if you let it run long enough, it goes quiet. That's where I found myself after those first few nights. Sleeping in my truck, washing up in gas station bathrooms, eating whatever I could afford. $40 doesn't stretch far when you don't have a plan. But somewhere between the third sunrise and the fifth cup of bad coffee, something in me shifted. I stopped asking why. Why she did it. Why I wasn't enough. Why I hadn't seen it sooner. Those questions led nowhere but deeper into the same hole. Instead, I started asking what now. That question gave me leverage. I called an old friend from years back, Michael. We'd worked together once, lost touch when life got busy. I hadn't talked to him in nearly a decade, but desperation has a way of cutting through pride. He didn't ask many questions. Just said, "You can crash on my couch. We'll figure it out." That couch became my first foothold. I picked up extra shifts wherever I could. Temporary work, manual labor, anything that paid daily or weekly. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. Saved every dollar like it mattered, because it did. At night, lying there staring at someone else's ceiling, I let myself feel the anger in small doses. Not enough to drown in it. Just enough to remember. Jennifer didn't just cheat. She erased me. That distinction sharpened my resolve. I stopped responding to her messages. There weren't many anyway. A few practical questions. One request for paperwork. No apologies. No remorse. That told me everything I needed to know about who she was becoming. Or maybe who she'd always been. I met with a lawyer at a free clinic. Laid out the facts. The finances. The affair. He listened, nodded, and said something I didn't expect. "She thinks she won already." That stuck with me. Divorce was slow. Cold. Transactional. Jennifer moved fast, confident. She assumed I'd fold. I didn't fight emotionally. I fought strategically. Documented everything. Showed up on time. Spoke only when necessary. I let her underestimate me. That's the thing about humiliation. If you survive it, you gain a kind of invisibility. People stop watching you closely. They stop guarding their moves. I took classes at night. Upgraded skills I'd let stagnate. Learned systems I'd never bothered with before. I was tired, sore, and lonely, but I was moving forward. Revenge fantasies came and went. I won't pretend they didn't, but I never chased them. Real revenge takes patience, and patience takes clarity. The goal wasn't to hurt Jennifer. The goal was to never need her again. Months passed. Then a year. I got steady work. Rented a small place of my own. Bought a cheap table, one chair, and a mattress on the floor. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The anger cooled into focus. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jennifer had moved in with Mark, that they traveled, that she talked about finally being happy. I didn't ask questions. I didn't react. I kept building. Piece by piece, quietly, deliberately, I rebuilt myself into someone I respected again. Not flashy, not loud, just solid. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. If she ever crossed my path again, I wouldn't need to say a word, because the man who walked out with $40 and a backpack was gone, and the man replacing him was patient enough to wait for the world to catch up. 6 years have a way of changing the balance of a room. I hadn't seen Jennifer in all that time. Not in person. Not really. Just fragments. A tagged photo here, a rumor there. Her name drifting through old circles, like a ghost nobody wanted to acknowledge. By then, my life was quiet in a good way. Structured. Earned. I'd moved up, not overnight, but steadily. I owned my time. Paid my bills early. Slept through the night. I wasn't rich, but I was unshakable. That's why I almost didn't recognize her voice when I heard it. Michael. I was at a regional business mixer, not my favorite place, but part of the job now. I turned, drink in hand, and there she was. Jennifer looked smaller. Same face, technically. Same hair, just less shine. The confidence she used to wear like armor sat crooked now, like it didn't quite fit. Her eyes darted over my suit, the badge on my chest, the people around me greeting me by name. I nodded once. Polite. Neutral. She smiled too fast. Wow. I almost didn't recognize you. I almost laughed. We exchanged a few surface-level words. Weather. Work. Nothing real. I could feel her studying me, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the one she'd publicly dismantled years ago. Then her smile cracked. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I hesitated just long enough to remind her she didn't control the moment. Then I nodded and followed her to a quieter corner. She didn't ease into it. Things didn't work out, she said. I waited. Mark left, she added. A year ago. Drained our savings. Took a job overseas. I didn't see it coming. I kept my face still. Not cold. Just calm. She talked faster then. About bad investments. About health scares. About how her parents weren't helping anymore. About how lonely it felt to start over in her 40s. Then she looked at me. Really looked. You seem good, she said. Better than good. I nodded. I am. That's when her voice broke. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Her composure collapsed like a tent with the poles pulled out. She sank down, right there on the carpeted floor, hands shaking, eyes wet, pride gone. I made a mistake, she said, crying now. I destroyed the only person who ever really loved me. People stared. Whispers sparked. Someone moved to help. I raised a hand gently and shook my head. I looked down at her, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. For 6 years, I'd imagined what this moment might feel like. Victory, justice, closure. It felt like none of those. It felt quiet. I didn't come here to hurt you, I said evenly. And I'm not here to save you. She looked up, desperate. Please. I need help. I need you. That word, need. I thought of the night I slept in my truck, of $40 and a backpack, of being laughed at while standing in a backyard, full of people who pretended not to see. I needed you once, I said. You pointed at me and made me a joke. She sobbed harder. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. I stepped back, offered a hand to help her up, not to pull her close. She took it, unsteady, broken. Then I turned and walked away. No speech, no threat, no grand reveal. Just a man leaving with his dignity intact. And behind me, for the first time in her life, Jennifer was the one being watched in silence. I didn't feel triumphant after that night. I felt tired. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of grief, but the kind that comes after you finish carrying something heavy for too long and finally set it down. As I drove home, city lights blurring past the windshield, I realized I wasn't replaying the moment. I wasn't rewriting what I should have said. That's how I knew it was over. Word traveled, as it always does. A few people reached out, some out of curiosity, some out of guilt. I kept my responses brief, polite, closed. I wasn't interested in reopening doors that had taken years to seal shut. Jennifer tried once more. A message, carefully written, apologetic, asking if we could talk like adults. I read it twice. Then I archived it. No reply. Not out of cruelty, out of self-respect. Life settled back into its rhythm. Work stayed busy. Mornings quiet. Evenings peaceful. I cooked for myself. Took walks. Learned to enjoy silence without filling it with noise or regret. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. It took me years to learn that. I downsized some things. Upsized others. Let go of objects tied to old versions of me. Kept the lessons. Sometimes I thought about the man I used to be. The one who believed endurance was love. I don't judge him anymore. He did the best he could with what he knew. Growth isn't about shame. It's about clarity. I ran into her parents once, accidentally, at a hardware store. Awkward nods. A quiet apology from her mother. No explanations. None were needed. Time had already spoken. I never married again. Not because I don't believe in love, but because I believe in choosing carefully. I learned that trust is built, not promised. That respect shows up in private before it ever shows up in public. Some nights, I still wake up thinking about that backyard. The laughter, the pointing finger, the silence afterward. But it doesn't sting anymore. It reminds me how far I've come. I'm not bitter. I'm not hardened. I'm simply awake. The life I have now isn't loud or flashy. It doesn't need to be. It's honest. And that's more than I ever had before. When people ask me how I moved on, I tell them the truth. I didn't chase closure. I built a life so full that the past couldn't follow. And that's something no one can take from you. Not anymore. So that's my story, folks. Not a tale about winning. Not about revenge. Just about what happens when a man finally stops begging for respect and starts requiring it. If there's one thing I learned the hard way, it's this. Humiliation only has power if you agree to stay where it happened. The moment you walk away, rebuild quietly, and refuse to explain yourself, the balance shifts. I didn't rise by tearing anyone down. I rose by standing back up. And somewhere along the way, the world noticed. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Here's the truth I leave you with. Earn the hard way. The best response to disrespect isn't anger. It's becoming someone who never has to tolerate it again.